Nobody tells you that grief has a smell. It smells like mothballs and old cardboard, like dust that hasn't been disturbed in 30 years, like the inside of a house that used to be full of someone and now is just full of things. Margaret Calloway learned that on a Tuesday morning in October, standing at the bottom of her attic stairs with her 2 adult children behind her, and a 30-day eviction notice folded in the back pocket of her jeans. She was 73 years old. She had lived in that house on Elmwood Drive in Columbus, Ohio for 45 years. She had brought both her babies home to that house. She had painted every room at least twice. She knew which floorboard creaked near the kitchen, which window stuck in July, and exactly how the afternoon light fell through the dining room. Curtains at 4 o'clock in November, turning everything amber and gold. That house was not just a building to Margaret. It was the physical shape of her entire life. And now, because the mortgage company had made a decision that felt less like business and more like cruelty, she had 30 days to empty it. Her husband, Daniel, had passed 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal, the way that particular disease always is. He was there, and then he was diminished. And then he was gone. And Margaret had spent every day since trying to figure out how to be a person without the other person, who made her feel like a person. She hadn't managed it yet. She wasn't sure she ever would. What she hadn't known, what Daniel had handled quietly, and without complaint for decades, the way he handled everything, was that the mortgage payments had become a struggle in his final years. His pension from the plant had been reduced after a restructuring. His medical bills had accumulated quietly, like water rising in a basement. He hadn't told her the full extent because he was Daniel, and Daniel believed his job was to protect her from worry. It was one of the things she had loved most about him. It was now the thing that had left her standing at the bottom of attic stairs, with 30 days and nowhere to go. Her daughter Claire was 44 and had driven in from Pittsburgh. Her son Robert was 41 and lived 20 minutes away, and had been avoiding this conversation for 2 weeks before. Claire finally forced the issue. They were good children, overwhelmed children. Claire had a mortgage of her own and 2 kids in high school. Robert had just started a new job and a new apartment. Neither of them had a guest room that could hold their mother permanently, and all 3 of them knew it, and none of them said it out loud. "We start at the top and work down," Claire said, "because someone had to say something. Whatever you want to keep goes in the living room. Whatever can be donated goes by the front door. Whatever is garbage goes straight to the dumpster Robert rented." Margaret nodded and climbed the stairs. The attic of a 45-year marriage is not a storage space. It is an archaeological site. Every box is a layer of sediment. Every object is a timestamp. There were Christmas decorations in boxes labeled in Daniel's handwriting, block letters in black marker, neat and certain the way he was neat and certain about everything. There were the children's school projects, a papier-mâché volcano, a diorama of the solar system missing 2 planets. There were Margaret's mother's dishes, wrapped in newspaper from 1987. There were 2 broken lamps Daniel had always meant to rewire, and never did. And Margaret stood holding one of them for almost 3 minutes before. Claire gently took it from her hands and placed it by the donation pile. They worked in near silence, the 3 of them. The silence of people who have too much to say and no language sufficient to say it. Robert carried boxes down the stairs without looking at their labels. Claire sorted with quiet efficiency, the same focused expression she'd had as a child doing homework. Margaret moved slowly, touching things, remembering. It was Robert who found the corner. It was behind an old wardrobe they'd pushed to the back of the attic sometime in the 90s, a piece of furniture too heavy to carry down and too sentimental to throw away. Getting it out had taken all 3 of them and 20 minutes of maneuvering, and when it finally cleared the space it had occupied for 30 years, there was a section of wall they hadn't seen since the wardrobe went up, and pressed against that section of wall, half hidden beneath a piece of old carpet that had been folded and laid, flat like a blanket, was a fireproof metal lockbox, dark grey, slightly dusty, about the size of a large shoebox. And on the top, in the same block letters Margaret would have recognized anywhere, In the same black marker Daniel used on every box in this attic, 2 words: for Margaret. The room went still. Claire stopped sorting. Robert set down the box he was carrying. Margaret stood and looked at the lockbox for a long time without moving. And what she felt in that moment was not excitement or hope or curiosity. What she felt was the particular pain of recognizing someone's handwriting when that someone is gone. It is one of the small, unexpected violences of loss, that a person's handwriting outlives them, that their hand made marks on the world that remain after the hand itself is stilled. "Mom," Robert said quietly. She crossed the attic and knelt down beside the box. Her knees ached. She didn't notice. She ran her fingers over the letters the way you touch a face. "Do you know the combination?" Claire asked. Margaret thought. And then, without knowing exactly how she knew, she tried Daniel's birthday. Month, day, year. 4 digits. The lock opened. Inside there was a letter on top. White envelope sealed, her name on the front. Below the letter, a manila folder, thick with papers. Below the folder, a photograph she hadn't seen in decades, the 2 of them, young and sun-browned and laughing, standing in front of something she didn't immediately recognize, the ocean bright and enormous behind them. Her hands were shaking. She opened the letter. "Margaret, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've found what I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for years. I'm sorry I didn't find the words while I was there to say them. You know, words were never my best thing. Actions were my best thing. So here is my last action. In 1987, before Claire was born, I bought a piece of property on the coast of North Carolina, near a town called Beaufort. It was cheap then, almost nothing, and my father had left me a small amount when he passed that I hadn't touched. I thought of it as something I'd tell you about someday when I turned it into something worth telling. I kept waiting until it was worth the telling. I kept thinking, next year I'll build something. Next year we'll go down there together. Next year I'll show her. Next year never came the way I planned, but the land did. It's yours, Margaret. Clear title. No mortgage, no liens, no complications. I kept the taxes paid every year without fail. It's the one bill I never missed, no matter what else was happening. The deed is in this box. The tax records are in this box. Everything is in this box. I don't know what it's worth now. Maybe nothing, maybe something. But it's yours, and it's paid for. And it's standing on the coast with the ocean in front of it. And I've been picturing you there my whole life. I love you more than I ever knew how to say properly. Daniel." Margaret read the letter twice. Then she sat on the attic floor of a house. She was losing and pressed the letter against her chest and wept in a way she had not wept since the funeral. Not the quiet, dignified grief she had shown her children for 14 months. Something older and rawer than that. Something that came from the place where a person keeps everything they thought was gone. Claire sat down beside her on the floor. Robert sat on the other side. Neither of them spoke. They just sat with her the way children sit with mothers, instinctively, the old geometry reasserting itself. When she could breathe again, Margaret opened the manila folder. The deed was there, exactly as Daniel described. Margaret Ann Calloway, sole owner, a parcel of land in Carteret County, North Carolina, 112 feet of oceanfront. The deed was dated November 14th, 1987. The most recent tax record was from the previous year, paid in full as it had been every year for 36 years, a quiet annual act of devotion that Daniel had performed without a word, maintaining a secret promise to a future he had never stopped believing in. Robert took the deed from her hands carefully and read it. His face went through several expressions that he clearly could not control. He handed it to Claire. Claire read it twice, and when she looked up, her eyes were bright. "Mom," she said, "this is oceanfront property." Margaret looked at the photograph again. She recognized it now. A flat piece of land, tall seagrasses, a stretch of Atlantic coast. Daniel with his arm around her. Both of them younger than their children were now. Both of them laughing at something the camera hadn't captured. She had been there. She had stood on that land 38 years ago and not known it was hers. The following weeks moved with a momentum that felt, to Margaret, almost mythological. An attorney confirmed the deed was valid, the title clear. the property entirely and unambiguously hers. A real estate appraiser drove down from Raleigh. When the appraisal came back, Robert had to sit down. Claire made a sound that was not quite a word. The oceanfront land in Carteret County, North Carolina, purchased for a few $1,000s in 1987, was worth more than $2.5 million. The coastal real estate market had done in 36 years what Daniel had hoped it would do in 5. He had just run out of time to see it. Margaret did not sell immediately. She did something first that felt necessary and right in a way. She couldn't fully explain to her children, though they didn't ask for an explanation. She drove down to Beaufort alone in October. The same month she'd been handed the eviction notice, and she stood on the land. It was flat and wild, and the grasses moved in the wind. Off the water, and the ocean was the same, impossible. Atlantic blue it is in the fall when the summer crowds are gone, and the coast belongs to itself again. She stood there for a long time, just standing, the wind loud and cold and clean around her. She talked to him. She talked to Daniel the way she'd been talking to him, in empty rooms for 14 months, except here, for the first time, she felt somehow like he might be close enough to hear. She told him she was furious with him for keeping this secret. She told him she understood exactly why he had. She told him that she wished, with a ferocity that surprised her, that he was standing next to her right now. She told him that she thought he was the most quietly magnificent person she had ever known, and that she would spend whatever time she had left making sure the people they loved understood that. Then she stood in the wind until she was cold through and the light was going, and she drove back to the small rented room she'd taken in town, and she sat at the small table by the window, and she felt, for the first time in 14 months, like a woman who had somewhere to go. She built a house on that land, not immediately, not quickly, but carefully, the way Daniel did things. A modest house, good materials, wide windows facing the water, a porch long enough to watch the whole horizon. Claire's family came for Thanksgiving that first year. Robert brought his girlfriend, who would be his fiancée by Christmas. Margaret made the same apple pie she had made every year of her married life, in an oven that was new, in a kitchen that was hers, with the sound of the ocean outside the window, where the sound of Elmwood Drive used to be. She still grieved. She would always grieve. That is the contract of loving someone for half a century. You carry them forever after. The loss inseparable from the love. But grief, she was learning, is not incompatible with being alive. They occupy the same space. You make room. On the first morning in the new house, she had made coffee and taken it to the porch in the dark before sunrise, wrapped in the old cardigan of Daniel's she still wore when the mornings were cold. She sat in the chair she'd positioned to face the water. The sky did what the sky does on the Atlantic coast. It turned, slowly, from black to deep blue to that particular shade of rose, gold that feels almost too beautiful to be real, and she watched it. And she held the warm mug in both hands, and she thought about a man who had spent 36 years quietly paying taxes on a piece of coast, waiting for the right moment to show her, never knowing the right moment would come only after he was gone. She thought about how love sometimes works exactly like that, quietly, patiently, working in the background of a life, without announcement, without credit, building something that will still be standing when everything else has fallen. The sun came up over the water. Margaret Calloway watched it rise. She was home. If this story moved you the way Daniel's love moved Margaret, don't let it end here. Watch until the very last second, because the best stories deserve to be finished. And if you believe that love is the kind of thing that stays long after everything else is gone, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. There are more stories waiting for people like you. People who still believe that goodness is real and that love, when it's true, never really disappears.